Hello and welcome. I'm George, founder of Sharing with Care TV. Today we have the privilege of introducing an exceptional individual called Joe Pardoe. Admittedly, Joe probably disagree being described as exceptional. However, in fact, I do consider him to be a very skilled education consultant with a deep vision, expertise, and unquestionable humility. Joe brings a wealth of mainstream educational knowledge to our platform, offering invaluable guidance and insight for parents, teachers, and professionals seeking greater understanding and knowledge to help navigate children through the UK education system. Please join us on this remarkable journey as we unlock the education door with Joe Pardoe, who I believe is a rising pioneer in shaping the future of learning for many young minds. Thank you.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for coming on to Sharing with Care TV. I'm sure our viewers are going to get so much valuable information from you. Again, thank you for your time. And I know you're a busy man, but yeah, let's just go with it. So, Joe, I know you're in various different capacities, but today it is about sharing your experiences and sharing that with our audiences, our parents, teachers, etc. So, just to kickstart, can you just talk a bit about your background in education? Now, where did it start? What triggered you? Because you could have gone anywhere in life, realistically. You're a smart dude, so I know you could have gone anywhere. But why education? Where did that passion come from? What was the spark?
Well, first, thanks, George. Thanks for having me. I hope I can be of some use. Um, it's a really good question, that, and I think the boring answer, which is partly true, is that when I grew up, I was in a sort of, pretty deprived town. No one in my family had been to university. Most of my friends from home haven't gone on to anything sort of further education or anything like that.
Okay.
And I had some teachers that really believed in me. So I always sort of found that education personally was a really powerful tool that helped me to go on and, go to university and then get the jobs. So that's the sort of boring answer, but it's true.
But you're saying, sorry, just to say, so you said you were one of the first in your town, so even your friends didn't go to university. So what was the response of you making that decision? Because you're breaking away from the fold at that point. So what was the reaction towards you?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, just for me, I think, it's always been, I massively respect everyone that I grew up with, and I like to think they respect me, and we just take different paths. And I genuinely am someone, this might come up in further conversations, that I just don't believe there's a right way of doing things, a wrong way of doing things.
Okay.
I just don't think that, I don't put university above going to work at 16. It doesn't matter. That's not something that I think is important personally to me.
Okay.
As long as everyone's happy and they're doing work that's valuable to them, that's more important. But yeah, it's always hard, of course, especially going into sort of a more middle class world of university, then into education and the professional world. Knowing that you don't have the sort of background that everyone else has got.
So there's a class distinction. You're saying you're coming from a working class background, integrating more middle class students. So that's an awakening. That must have been quite an awakening for you, because a whole different mindset that comes with that, I would have thought.
Yeah. I think it was the first time at university you realise. So obviously, when you grew up, you don't think, you don't notice that sort of stuff. And it was only later when I was at university I started realising that most of my friends there had very different backgrounds to what I had and what I was going back to.
Okay.
But I do think, what has helped me in my career is being really grateful for what I've got, and never sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Not being ever sort of with a sense of unhappiness about my life, because I know what the way I work and what I do is it really suits me, and I'm really lucky to be able to do it. And in a different world I would have been doing a different type of job, and I maybe might not have felt so comfortable. So yeah, I think that's the main thing. But going back to your other question about sort of where my passion for education came from, it was the sort of less boring answer, the less sort of cliche answer was, I just happened to be at university and I saw an email from one of my lecturers saying about a job in Japan.
Okay.
And I had no desire to travel. I had no desire to do any of that sort of stuff. It wasn't on my radar. I'd just broken up with my girlfriend at the time, who was really interested in traveling and all that sort of stuff. And I think partly just to, don't know, maybe out of spite.
Mend the broken heart.
I just applied for this job, and I didn't
Oh,
expect
okay,
it.
okay.
I didn't expect to
All
get
right,
it,
okay.
and I went for the interview, got the job, and 6 months later, I was living on a small island in Japan.
Oh, fantastic.
Um,
Oh, fantastic. So what were you doing out there? What were you doing?
so it's something called the JET program, which is an amazing
Okay,
program. And the idea was that you go and work in rural Japanese communities, which are not very diverse, and you go and work in schools. They're helping children learn English and understand sort of more about the world outside Japan, basically. And I worked at this really rural part of Japan. It was 4 hours by boat from the mainland. I worked
okay.
in 40 schools in total, so a different school every day, basically.
Oh, wow.
And I absolutely loved it. It was transformational for me. Um, and after that 2 years had finished, I came back home, and I think something random happened. I didn't know what I was going to do in my life. I didn't know what job to do next. And my cousin was at primary school at the time, and someone asked me to take her to school. So I just drove her to school. And as I was taking her into the class, into the primary school, I got the energy of a school again. You know, you're walking that gate,
Wow.
bustling, and there's people, and it's full of young people, and it's just exciting. And I was like, okay, that's what I missed most. That feeling is what I loved. And then
Okay,
I
okay.
decided I should become a teacher.
So that was very similar. The energy, the vibe was very similar to what you'd left behind in Japan.
Oh yeah, there was no, the schools are, in my experience, they're very similar no matter where you go. And to me, they're the best place. Even now, I think they're the best place to work. It's such an energizing workplace.
Fantastic. So you've come back to the UK, and then you said you've taken you visited the schools doing a drop off. So at that point in time, you decided to become a teacher. So what subjects? So at that point, because like, there's so many different subjects in the whole, in terms of teaching. So what did you focus on in terms of you thought, well, this is what I would like to teach. I'd like to share with younger minds.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, my degree was history and politics, and so that was the natural sort of thing to go for. I was lucky again in a sense because at that point it's different now, but then um, teaching wasn't a shortage profession at that stage. A lot of people
Right.
get into it,
Okay.
and
Okay.
history in particular in secondary was a popular subject. So it could have gone differently, but I applied for something called Teach First, um, which was still relatively new at the time I applied for it, and I got on to it. A bit of a random detour because I had a friend who was working in China at the time, and he asked if I
Okay.
wanted to go and work in his school. So I deferred that placement for a year and went to work in Shanghai
Okay.
for a year, and then came back, and I was placed in Yorkshire in Hull as a history teacher.
Wow. From Japan, China, back to oh,
Yeah.
that was a real head whirl moment, I would have thought.
Yeah, I think I didn't realize at the time actually, but it's more and more now I look back at it and go, there's this thing apparently called counter culture shock. So everyone talks about
Okay.
culture shock when you go to another country,
Okay.
but there's a whole other thing where it's like if you've lived in another country for a while and you come back to your own country, it's quite hard to psychologically get in the mindset of it. I vividly remember one sort of Wednesday evening in Hull at like 7 o'clock, like walk into the local Tesco to buy some milk or something. And I think this is boring because for 4 years, even going to the local shop was a massive challenge because I had to navigate the line, like,
Right. Of course. Of
and
course. Of
and,
course.
and suddenly I was back in a place that was familiar, and I didn't have that yet. So I think for those couple of years, it was difficult to transition back into the UK, but it was definitely the right thing to do for me.
Right. Okay. Okay. And from what you gained, the experience that you gained in both Japan and China, when you trained as a teacher here, did that inform your teaching? Could you see the influence of what you had previously been through? Did it inform the work that you were doing here?
Yeah, I think it did, in a couple of ways. The first way was on a surface level, I'd had a job, and I think a lot of teachers I trained with when I came back, I just finished university and then we're going straight into teaching
Okay.
in the UK. And, going from a student life to the busy life for a teacher is quite a big transition. Whereas I'd had a couple of years of practicing that, which I think just helped me. And I'd obviously been comfortable. I knew schools, and I knew how to sort of, I was sort of confident enough that I could go into a classroom and teach. So, so that really helped. I think on a deeper level, more philosophically, I'd had the experience of seeing education that was based on a different value set. And it made me realize that education is ideological,
Okay.
and it's political, and it's got philosophical underpinnings to it, which are not fact. We don't have to do things this way. Just because we've done it for 100 years doesn't mean we have to keep doing it that way. And because I'd seen it done a different way, it was quite tangible to me. That it wasn't like an abstract thing. It was like, well, they don't do that there, and they're fine. But we do this here, and suddenly people think that we have to do that, because if we don't, everything's going to fall apart. So I think it made me question a lot about what we do in education, why we do it, what's the sort of underlying assumptions of any decision we make, and be willing to challenge and push back on that.
Okay. And in terms of that learning, that particular philosophical outlook, were you given any scope to use that understanding to shape a curriculum here? So in Hull, in London, were there any point in time where you could use that knowledge?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think when I was in Hull, it was less obvious, because I was new I was new there, and I was new into the UK system, and I was in a sort of very much I'm in this all the time, but at that stage in particular, I was in a really sort of learning mindset.
Right. Okay.
UK, I'm learning. I'm not here to sort of challenge it. But I think by the end, I was definitely questioning some of the decisions that were being made and the impact it was having on children, and why those decisions were being made. And it seemed to me that to be based on assumptions or values that I didn't agree with, and that's why I left. When I moved to London, I was in a really, again, fortunate position that I was in a startup school, so it was from scratch. And
what, from ground zero?
Yeah, so I joined in its second year, so I wasn't there straight.
Right. Okay.
I was there in its second year, and so yeah, from that point on, the road was empty. We had the space to design it how we wanted to design it.
That's a totally blank canvas, it seems.
Yeah, there was obviously some foundations there, but it was open for debate and discussion, and the leadership there were amazing, and they were really intellectual and willing to challenge things and push boundaries and do things differently. So in that space, I was able to have a lot of freedom there, and I think my background of being abroad in different systems and then having sort of a couple of years in the UK, I was able to start synthesizing those two things. We needed to make sure children got really good exam results. We needed to make sure children were set up for the world of the UK. We needed to make sure children were well behaved, but we could also do things differently.
Fantastic. And what age group were you interacting with? What age group were you teaching at the time?
At that time, it was mostly sort of 11 to 14-year-olds. Obviously, as the school grew, we went right through to age 18. I was lucky enough to take children from age 11 right through to age 18. So I saw them through the whole journey right to university, which was very exciting. But because the school I worked at was also an all-through school, which meant we had primary on the same site, I was I was in a space where, we had children right from age 4 right through to age 18, which is, again, a really amazing experience for an educator, I think.
Yeah, because you're seeing the whole transition. You see them develop both intellectually, physically, academically.
It's a really great space, and interacting with the different professionals that work in the different spaces, because often in our system, primary and secondary are very separate, and they don't really communicate with each other. And we were able to sort of do our staff meetings together, our trainings together, and it was really great to learn from primary practitioners and also share some secondary thoughts.
Because those are different stages of learning, from primary all the way through sixth form, and you're saying that you'd meet with all colleagues from those across those different spheres.
And that was really, that really helped me develop as a teacher and a thinker around curriculum.
Okay, so you worked in, where did you work? Did it stop at, say, sixth form? Because it seems like Mr. Pardoe has worked from right across the spectrum. So did it kind of end stop at from the sixth form point
Yeah, so
of view? Okay.
the last sort of couple of years I was at that school, I mostly worked with sixth formers,
Oh,
teaching
right, okay.
politics. That was really great, and I think it's something that I would love to go back to at some point in my career.
Okay.
But then I suppose the next phase that I worked with was my next job was then working for a multi-academy trust, overseeing sort of professional development. So working training teachers. So
This is more your experiences of now, or
yeah, this is what I'm doing now. But I'm now self-employed, so I don't do it through the trust.
okay. I take that's for your company's School Compass. Am I right in saying that? School Compass.
Yeah, so I've set up my own consultancy, still working on the name really and working out it. But now what I do is I'm mostly helping schools and local authorities and organizations design innovative curriculum, whether that's interdisciplinary, so two subjects combined, whether that's building work experiences into the curriculum, or
Okay.
with local employers. Yeah, so that's sort of and sort of authentic real world projects.
Okay.
So
I see that because Joe, if there's anything, and if somebody like yourself you worked abroad, you've seen a particular curriculum, and you've been part of that curriculum, putting that in curriculum, working on curriculum in China, as well as in Japan, Japan and China, and then Hull, and then now London. So by virtue of your experiences, there's so much, particularly new teachers, newly qualified, can gain so much from you, from your experiences. You touched on real world learning. So can you give me examples where the two have come together? Because I do believe that life outside of school, in terms of employers, employment, there's so much they can offer young people, and vice versa. So could you give me examples of projects that you've worked on in terms of the real world working and bringing that into school, projects into school, and students being involved in that?
yeah, it's a really important one, I think, to get right this. And I think the biggest barrier is often there aren't usually many mechanisms or processes to enable workplaces and schools to collaborate.
Okay.
And schools, I think, can be quite baffling places to anyone that's not in them on a daily basis. And what tends to happen is, employers, I in my experience, are really keen to get involved with schools and young people, and it's something they're really passionate about. But they just find that there's lots of barriers to doing it. And often when the school finally lets them in, the thing they do is stand up in front of an assembly, which is terrifying to do if you're not experienced that sort of thing.
Sure.
And it doesn't really benefit anyone, I don't think. So what we were trying to do was carve out curriculum space where our teachers and employers could come together using frameworks and co-design projects which they would deliver together, including assess together. And that fed right into our work experience program. So we send students out to workplace, but instead of just getting them to just literally go and spend 2 weeks in a job, we wanted to work with the employer to plan what that student was going to be doing while they were there, to make sure that the experience was really high quality. Some good examples of this, I mean, there's lots of them. The main one that springs to my mind is we've had teachers work with local architects to come in and do design projects. We've had lots of science collaborations with universities and research labs, drama and art, so getting people in the art world into the school to help them plan and test their projects. And I'm currently about to just go and work in Wales, where I'm going there on Monday to help sort of 4 schools work with a local construction firm that's just moved to the area, who wants to get involved in local education. So working with those schools to sort of, and the employer, to come together and plan a project which they can deliver in their schools.
Fantastic. That's really that's really hands-on. So it's rather than that employer coming in, as you mentioned before, to an assembly and just being a talking shop and then leaving. That in my mind, that's not really adding any value to the young person's kind of like more longer term, lifelong learning. But from what you're saying, your work is engaging with the employer, getting them into the school, getting them around the table, and it's a real collaboration between education and employer. That's fantastic, Joey.
Definitely, I think that was the sort of thing we really wanted to do was, and again, it's starting from that position of, the employer brings so much skill, experience, knowledge that we don't have in education. But we also bring in education lots of skills and knowledge that the employer might not have, particularly how to work with young people and plan sessions and this sort of thing. So the idea was to bring them together in a sort of mutually respectful setting and say, let's see how we can make this work together, so that you, as the employer, get the chance to do what you do really well, and the teachers get the chance to do what they do really well for the benefit of the young people.
Fantastic, Joe. You've mentioned, so you've kind of like covered quite a broad area of what you're currently doing in engaging with schools and employers. Is there anything else in terms of yourself as a consultant? What other support can you offer? What else do you actually offer other than that building that interface between employer and schools? What else does yourself as a consultant, what do you offer?
Yes, so I'm kind of doing two things really at the moment, which I don't think is the sort of standard practice. I think the idea is most to focus on one thing and do it really well, whereas I'm doing two things. So with my school focused stuff, it's based on what we've just said. So it's all about innovative curriculum design, interdisciplinary learning, real world projects, working with employers, that sort of stuff. But something that happened, I became a dad sort of 2 years ago, and the biggest learning for me, well, there's lots of learning obviously in that journey, but one thing I really noticed was I started to really engage with parents as a parent. The first time in my career. And I started to realize that most parents don't really know much about schools. They really care about education for their children, but they don't really, other than they're going to a school sort of 30, 40 years ago, they don't really know what the current system's like. They don't really know what goes on in it, what happens. And I remember sitting there on an NCT course, one of the childbirth courses, thinking there needs to be something like this for parents so that they can understand the school system. So I'm also running courses for parents, basically, to help them navigate the school landscape. So whether that's understanding what happens in a primary school, how to navigate the primary school curriculum journey, what assessments happen in primary school, how to deal with problems if any arise, how to transition into secondary, what to look for in Ofsted reports, league table data, government published data, that sort of stuff, right through to GCSEs, exams, post-16.
Wow, so that's quite a broad spectrum. That's really broad. You mentioned about Ofsted as well, because that's something I look at, but as a parent myself, I'll just look at, okay, is it got good, or is it outstanding, or is it, needs improvement? It's just one section of that report.
Yes.
But you said you mentioned that you'd go into like what you need to look at within that report. So there's more than just looking at the initial final assessment, the tick box, basically.
Yeah, I mean, we're going full circle here. So this is where I said right at the start, I think that I just genuinely believe there's no objective right thing to do, whether that's having a kid and going to work at 16 or going to university and whatever. I don't think one is right and one is wrong. They're all just different. And I think that is exactly the same about schools. So I don't believe that there's a right school or a perfect school. I think all schools have positive and negatives. Ofsted, to my mind, are a really great tool that parents should use, but they're only one tool, and maybe not even the most important tool they should use. So for me, as a teacher, but also as a parent, I will take into consideration any Ofsted report, but that won't be the deciding factor in me deciding.
That's a great answer, Joe. I'm very conscious of time, and I know you're a very busy man. Final question: if there's anything based on yourself as a consultant, anything you'd like to communicate, a message you'd like to leave with parents who could be watching, who will watch this recording, anything you'd like to share with them at all, or how can they get in contact with you if they want to get in contact? How can they get in contact with you?
This is my plug, isn't it? So I have a website which is www.school-compass.com, and on that, all my contact details are there, and there's a list of all the courses that I run and blogs and stuff that they can have a look at. And yeah, get in touch if you want anything. I'm more than happy to help. I think the last thing I'd say is just, is that point around education is a choice, and it's not something that is objectively right or wrong. It's also very dynamic. The amount of parents I meet and they say, "Oh, I want to send my child to that school," and I say, "Why?" And they go, "We love the head teacher."
Right. Okay.
And I go,
Okay.
"Great." there's absolutely no guarantee that head teacher will be there in September, let alone in 3 or 4 years' time. So
It's very true. That's like voting, is it? It's like the whole political system. Person's only there for like 4 or 5 years. Oh, I like the look of him or her. They've
yeah,
gone.
I think the point is, it's not about saying, don't not consider the head teacher, but
Sure.
just it's education is, there's lots of pros and cons any approach. There really isn't an objective right way of doing it. There might be one that you really agree with or disagree with, and it's constantly changing. Schools
Okay.
are, when you think about schools, I was thinking about this morning actually, even just dropping my son off to nursery, and I think one of the parents asked me this morning, because there's lots of things going on our son's nursery, but this parent said to me, "Oh, we're thinking of taking our child out now and moving to another nursery. Are you going to do the same?" And I was like, "No, no, we're not." And I was like, "Because he really likes it here." And I was walking away going, "What is it that he really likes?" Because a nursery, like a school, is just an abstract concept.
Sure.
Is it the
Sure.
people that he likes? Is it the processes that the nursery have or the school have? Is it what they teach and how they do it? I don't know. And I was trying to work out that, going, actually, if you think of a school as a static thing,
Mm, mm,
that's when problems arise, because they're not. They're
mm.
ideological, they're political, they're making choices all the time, they're dynamic, they're constantly changing. Staff, students, parents,
Absolutely.
it's a big churn all the time.
Absolutely.
And I think as a parent, you just have to accept that's what it is.
That's fantastic, Joe, because you're right. It isn't static. And it's interesting you're saying that, because there are things within the infrastructure changing, but there's also the external factors as well that are bearing down on the school and political choices, governments, the community. So that's a really good point. And funny enough, I hope I'm not making an assumption. I don't think enough parents recognize that okay, the building might not be shaking unless there's an earthquake, but I mean, the processes have to adapt. A lot of the times, I believe parents probably approach schools based on their own experiences, whether that's a plus or a minus.
Yeah, I think that's true. I've got no. I completely understand that, by the way, because schools are really difficult to understand.
Mm,
It's a bit like, going back to why I set it up. Um, my analogy is always hospitals,
right.
because they're another big institution full of people that are already important. And I suppose before I had the NCT course, I just assumed that I just go into hospital and they do what they do and I leave. And
Oh, sure, sure.
that's what I realized, actually. When I go into hospital, there's lots of different things that could happen. There's always choices and things there's not one right way of doing it. There's a million different ways of doing it.
Sure.
And the better informed I am about it, the more comfortable I am with it, because I know that whatever
Sure.
choice I make, there's going to be pros and cons. And I think,
Mm,
because parents don't see that about schools, it can feel so high stakes. I've got to get them in that
mm,
school. If I don't get in that school, everything's going to go wrong.
of course.
Which in my experience just isn't the case. And because it's so daunting, it's almost easier just to disengage from it.
Of course, of course. There's so much coming at you, so much information, in fact, so
Yeah.
much information.
And you're busy, you've got other jobs and whatnot. And so why would you spend all the time sort of engaging in the
Of course.
latest trends of pedagogy?
Yeah.
Um, when that's why I started that part of my business up too.
Okay. Okay. Joe, do you know, I could spend so much time here talking to you about this. This is fantastic. I would like to invite you back on again, and because I think we can definitely take a deeper dive and share a lot more and get more of you out there. Um, But for now, I think, again, because of time, we need to bring this to an end. All I can say is thank you so much for this interview. I'm sure many people are going to get, it's so valuable. But yeah, definitely want to have you back on again. There's so much more you can share. I'm confident of saying that.
No, no, thank you, George. It's been a great, I always like speaking, great questions, and yeah, definitely happy to do it again.
Brilliant. Thank you, Joe. Thank you. And until next time. Thanks.
Thanks, bye, Bye.